A powerful black tech CEO, Amara Johnson, walks into a 3B boardroom deal only to be humiliated by billionaire Richard Kane, who sneers, "I don't do business with people like you." What begins as personal pain erupts into a movement. Amara's silence turns into resistance. Allies rally behind her. Marcus's betrayal threatens her from within, and the media storm exposes the deep rot of systemic racism at the top of corporate America. From explosive headlines to massive street protests, shareholder revolts, and public hearings, the arrogant empire of Kane begins to crumble, while Amara's voice becomes the spark for change. Through betrayal, resistance, and poetic justice, Richard Kane loses everything: his empire, reputation, and freedom, while Amara builds a legacy that proves the world can no longer silence people like us. Marble floors echoed under Amara Johnson's heels as she stepped into the towering glass headquarters of Kane International. The lobby gleamed with wealth, gold accents, towering sculptures, silent fountains. But what caught her attention weren't the luxury details. It was the looks. A white receptionist's smile flickered into stiffness the moment Amara approached. Her eyes darted toward Amara's skin, then down at her diamond watch. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, voice laced with suspicion. Amara handed her the invitation. "Amara Johnson, here for Mr. Kane." The receptionist hesitated. "Oh, right." She pressed the phone button. "Security will escort you up." Behind her, a pair of executives whispered, their laughter muffled. One of them muttered, "Didn't expect her to show up here." Amara heard it. She always heard it. Her assistant, Michael, leaned closer. "Ignore them," Amara smiled faintly. "I always do." The elevator ride felt like an ascent into judgment. Michael stood quietly beside her, clutching a leather folder. "Are you ready for this?" he asked softly. "As ready as anyone who's about to hand over $3 billion, Amara replied, her tone dry. Michael chuckled nervously. "Just be prepared. Kane has a reputation." "I know," Amara said. Her reflection stared back from the steel elevator doors, poised, calm, but bracing herself. When they entered the 48th floor boardroom, silence fell. 12 white men in suits sat around the table. Their gazes followed her like she was an intruder, not an invited guest. Richard Kane stood at the head of the table, tall, broad-shouldered, his hair silver like a crown. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Ms. Johnson," he said, drawing out her name. "Finally." "Mr. Kane," Amara replied, taking her seat. Papers shuffled. Coffee cups clinked. Yet the silence pressed like a weight. Richard leaned back in his chair. "I must say I was curious to meet you." "Curious?" Amara's tone was calm but firm. "Yes," he said. "You've built quite an empire. Impressive for someone from, well, let's just say humble beginnings." A ripple of amusement passed among the executives. Amara met his eyes. "I believe the numbers speak louder than my beginnings." "Numbers," Richard repeated, smirking. "Yes, though, if I'm being honest, I've always believed partnerships are about fit, about culture, about tradition." Michael stiffened beside her. Amara folded her hands. "And yet you invited me here." Richard's smirk deepened. "I did because I had to see for myself. To see if the rumors were true." She tilted her head. "What rumors?" "That you actually believed you belonged at this table." The words dropped like a blade. Silence. No one laughed, but no one protested either. Amara's pulse quickened, but her face remained composed. "Excuse me?" Richard leaned forward, voice dropping into ice. "I don't do business with people like you." The room froze. Michael's mouth opened, but no sound came out. One executive coughed into his hand, smothering a grin. Amara felt the sting, sharp and familiar, but she didn't flinch. She stared at Richard, eyes steady. "Then this meeting," she said quietly, "is over." She rose from her chair. Michael scrambled to follow. Richard chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't take it personally, Ms. Johnson, it's just business." Amara paused at the doorway, her back to him. "No," she said, her voice calm but cutting. "It's racism, and one day it will cost you more than you can imagine." The door closed behind her, and the empire of Richard Kane had no idea its cracks had just begun. The door had barely closed behind Amara when Richard Kane's voice carried through the boardroom, mocking in its ease. "Did you see her face?" "Priceless," the men erupted into low laughter. Some covered their mouths with papers, others exchanged smirks like schoolboys caught in a cruel prank. But Amara hadn't left yet. She stood just outside the frosted glass, listening. Michael tugged her sleeve. "Amara, let's go," he whispered urgently. Her jaw tightened. She didn't move. Inside, one of the executives muttered, "Bold of her to even think she could sit here. This isn't her world," another chimed in, chuckling. "Imagine the shareholders' faces if we actually signed with her company. A black woman leading a billion-dollar merger? Unthinkable." Richard laughed hardest of all. "She should be grateful we entertained her at all." "I wanted to see the spectacle myself." Michael finally pulled her toward the elevator. "You don't need to hear this." Amara's eyes were cold. "I already knew." Hours earlier, she had walked in with the weight of history on her shoulders. Now she walked out carrying the weight of insult. But the sting wasn't just hers. Her team had been in the room too. When she returned to the conference suite reserved for her staff, silence greeted her. 4 of her executives sat stiffly, eyes on the carpet. Amara placed her bag on the table. "You heard it." Nobody spoke. Finally, Marcus, her CFO, muttered, "We expected something like this."
Kane is old money.
"Old rules." Amara fixed him with a sharp look. "And what does that mean, Marcus? That we should swallow it? Smile while they spit on us?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I'm just saying, sometimes power doesn't change hands, Amara, not easily." Her assistant Michael snapped, "So we let him humiliate her? We just walk away like nothing happened?" "Walking away may be survival," Marcus said flatly. Amara's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. "Survival is not the same as dignity." The room fell silent again. From the corner, Julia, her young communications director, spoke up timidly. "Ms. Johnson, if this gets out, it could hurt them more than it hurts us." Amara looked at her. "Do you think anyone will believe me over Richard Kane?" Julia hesitated, then whispered, "If they hear it in your voice, yes." Back upstairs, Kane's boardroom continued like a theater of cruelty. One executive leaned back in his chair. "What if she talks?" Richard waved a hand dismissively. "Let her. Who's going to take her word against mine? Against all of ours? No one important will listen. She'll disappear like they always do." The men nodded, reassured. Another joked, "Maybe she'll run back to her little startup friends and complain." Laughter rolled again. Amara sat in her car, staring out the tinted window at the city skyline. Michael sat beside her, fuming. "You should fight back now. Go to the press. Call them out." "No," Amara said quietly. Michael turned to her. "Why not?" He deserves silence first," she interrupted. "The kind that makes him wonder when the storm is coming." Michael blinked. "So you're waiting?" "Yes." Later that night, in her penthouse office overlooking the city, Amara replayed the words in her head. "I don't do business with people like you." They weren't new. She had heard variations her whole life, at banks, at universities, at fundraisers where her presence was questioned. But this time was different. This was $3 billion. This was a stage where the whole world could see, and Kane had chosen to humiliate her not just privately but publicly. Her phone buzzed. "It was Marcus, Amara," he said carefully. "The board thinks we should still consider some arrangement. Maybe not Kane, but another partner. If we stir too much noise, other companies might see us as trouble." Amara's tone sharpened. "So we pretend nothing happened?" "I'm saying, protect the company. Your pride is important, but $3 billion could change everything." She was silent for a long moment. Finally, she said, "Marcus, $3 billion means nothing if I have to kneel to get it." He exhaled heavy. "Then you're going to war." "No," Amara replied, voice cold as steel. "The war already started. They fired first. Meanwhile, at Kane International, the celebration had turned into whiskey toasts. To keeping the old ways alive, one executive said, raising his glass. Richard smirked, clinking his glass. "Gentlemen, remember this day. We reminded the world who belongs at this table." The men drank, laughing, blind to the cracks already forming beneath their empire. And in her office across town, Amara sat in silence, staring out at the night sky. Her assistant entered softly. "What now?" Amara didn't turn. "Now," she said, "we make them regret every word." The car ride from Kane International was suffocating. Michael sat in the back beside Amara, clutching the leather folder that now felt like a meaningless weight. The driver kept his eyes forward, silence thick as glass. For 10 minutes, no one spoke. Finally, Michael whispered, "Amara, are you okay?" She didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the blur of city lights outside the window, the reflection streaking across her face. "Say something," Michael pleaded. Her lips parted, but only one word came. "Mother." Michael frowned. "Your mother?" Amara leaned back, her voice distant. "When I was 9, my mother cleaned offices like Kane's. She used to take me sometimes because she couldn't afford childcare. I'd sit under the desk while she scrubbed floors." Michael listened silently. "She told me once," Amara continued softly. "Amara, don't let them see you. If they see you, they'll think you don't belong here." Her eyes glistened. "And tonight in that boardroom I realized Kane said the same thing. Just louder." The driver cleared his throat, uncomfortable. Michael's hands tightened around the folder.
He doesn't get to define you.
"He doesn't get to erase everything you've built." Amara finally turned to him, her eyes sharp with pain. But he tried. "And the worst part?" No one stopped him. Not one man at that table opened his mouth. Her voice broke, but only slightly. Silence is louder than insults. The car stopped at a red light. Horns blared outside, impatient, alive with city chaos. Amara's mind wasn't in the present. It was drifting, sliding back through years she had buried. Flashback, age 17. A scholarship dinner. She remembered standing alone at the buffet, holding a paper plate. A professor walked by and asked, "Are you here to serve?" She had smiled politely. "No, I'm the recipient." His face flushed, but he never apologized. Flashback, age 23. Her first pitch meeting. A banker interrupted halfway through her presentation. "Your company sounds ambitious. Do you have a white co-founder to reassure investors?" She had clenched her teeth, smiled again, and kept pitching. Flashback, age 29. The day her first product went public, a journalist wrote, "Impressive considering her background. Not impressive because of her brilliance. Impressive despite who she was." The car jolted forward as the light turned green. Amara inhaled shakily, pulling herself back to the present. Michael reached out, touching her hand. "You don't have to carry all of it alone." She gave him a weary look. "Michael, I've always carried it alone. That's the price of being the first." Silence again. Then Amara straightened, squaring her shoulders. Her voice steadied. "No more swallowing. No more smiling. Kane thinks he broke me, but he just reminded me why I started in the first place." Michael searched her face. "So what now?" Amara looked back out the window. The city glowed with opportunity and betrayal alike. "Now," she said slowly, "we stop begging for seats at their tables. We build our own." They arrived at her penthouse. She stepped out, heels clicking against the pavement, each step harder, firmer than before. The doorman greeted her nervously, sensing the storm in her eyes. Inside, Amara climbed the stairs alone. Michael watched her go, unsure whether she was rising or breaking, maybe both. In the quiet of her study, Amara poured herself a glass of wine and stared at the city skyline. Her reflection in the glass looked fragile, almost broken. But when she raised the glass to her lips, the reflection hardened. "This isn't the end," she whispered to herself. Her voice was steady again. The headlines the next morning were sterile. Kane International welcomes Johnson Tech for private meeting. Rumored 3B deal still unconfirmed. No mention of the insult. No trace of the humiliation. On paper, nothing had happened. But within the walls of corporate circles, whispers traveled like wildfire. A secretary had overheard. An assistant had seen Amara storm out. Fragments of truth dripped into the industry pipeline. By noon, rumors carried sharp edges. Richard Kane rejected Amara Johnson. Harshly, publicly. Amara sat at the head of her own boardroom, the skyline spread behind her. Her executives shifted uneasily in their chairs, waiting for her to speak. Marcus, the CFO, broke the silence. "Amara, Kane's people are already spinning this. They're saying you were unprepared, that your numbers didn't add up." Amara didn't flinch. Lies always move faster than truth. Marcus leaned forward. "Then fight back. Call a press conference. Release a statement. If we don't control the narrative, they will." Across the table, Julia, the communications director, hesitated. Or maybe silence is better. At least for now. All eyes turned to her. Julia swallowed. If we come out swinging, they'll frame us as emotional, as reckless. But if we stay quiet, Kane grows nervous. He knows what he said. He knows what we heard. The silence will eat at him. Amara's lips curved almost imperceptibly. You're learning, Michael, ever loyal, frowned. But what if silence makes us look weak? Amara finally spoke with authority, her voice cutting the air. Silence isn't weakness. It's a blade. The longer I hold it, the sharper it gets. The room stilled. Marcus shook his head. Amara, I've worked in finance for 30 years. These men don't respond to silence. They respond to force, to leverage. We need to remind shareholders what we bring to the table. Her eyes locked on him. No, Marcus. We don't need to remind them. Kane already did. He exposed himself. He showed the world his table is rotten. Her voice dropped, firm. We will not give them a penny. Not a deal. Not a contract, nothing. Gasps fluttered around the table. Amara. Marcus began. No. Her hand struck the table softly, but the sound echoed. I built this company without their permission, and I'll protect it without their approval. We don't crawl back. Julia's eyes lit with something like awe. Michael sat taller. Even those who doubted her felt the weight of her conviction. Later that evening, Amara stood on her balcony. Michael joined her, the city glittering below like a restless sea. You're really going to hold the line? He asked. Yes. And if Kane leaks his version, then I let him dig his own grave, Amara replied coolly. Because arrogance doesn't whisper, it shouts. And the world is always listening. Michael studied her profile, the steel in her jaw. You sound calm. Amara gave a faint smile. Calm is just rage with discipline. Meanwhile, across town in Kane International's penthouse, Richard Kane slammed a crystal glass against his bar. She walked out without begging, he muttered. Pacing. One of his closest advisors, Whitmore, tried to soothe him. It doesn't matter, Richard. You embarrassed her. She'll lick her wounds and disappear, Kane sneered. Then why hasn't she spoken? Why hasn't she denied the deal? Why the silence? Whitmore hesitated. Perhaps she's regrouping. Kane's jaw clenched. Or perhaps she's planning. Silence is noise when it comes from her. I don't like it. He poured another drink, but his hand trembled slightly. Back at Johnson Tech, Julia approached Amara privately. Ms. Johnson, the media's calling nonstop. They want quotes, interviews, anything. Should I keep saying no comment? Amara didn't hesitate. Yes, every no comment is louder than an explanation. Eventually they'll ask why, and by then Kane will already be sweating. Julia nodded, almost smiling. You're turning silence into a weapon. Amara's gaze hardened. I'm turning it into a mirror. Let's see what he sees when he finally looks at himself. In the stillness of night, Amara closed her eyes, remembering her mother's voice again. Don't let them see you, Amara. If they see you, they'll think you don't belong here, but now, she whispered to the memory. They already see me, Mama, and I'm not hiding anymore. The boardroom was restless. Amara sat at the head of the table, arms folded, eyes calm but sharp. Around her, executives shuffled papers, whispered to one another, exchanged uneasy glances. Marcus cleared his throat. Amara, we need to talk about this. Stance you're taking, her brow lifted. You mean refusing to bow to Richard Kane? I mean refusing $3 billion, Marcus said bluntly. Julia cut in quickly. It's not just about the money. It's about respect. About dignity. Marcus waved her off. Dignity doesn't pay salaries, Julia. It doesn't expand market share. It doesn't protect us if Kane starts whispering to other investors. Amara's voice dropped, cool and steady. If Kane whispers, let him. Whispers can't bury the truth. Marcus leaned forward, his tone urgent. Amara, listen to me. I've spoken to some contacts. Kane's board isn't happy with him either. If you extend an olive branch quietly, we might salvage something. Maybe not the full merger, but at least an alliance. The room stilled. Julia's eyes widened. Michael slammed his pen down. An alliance? With the man who humiliated her? Are you out of your mind? Marcus ignored him. His gaze was locked on Amara. This is business. Emotions aside, you can't afford to make Kane your enemy. Amara stared back, unblinking. He made himself my enemy the moment he opened his mouth. After the meeting, Amara walked alone down the hall, heels echoing against polished stone. She felt Marcus's footsteps behind her. Amara, wait. She turned, expression unreadable. Marcus lowered his voice. Look, I know you're angry. Angry? She interrupted. Marcus, I'm insulted, yes. But anger doesn't run this company. Strategy does, then be strategic, Marcus urged. Don't burn bridges. We need Kane's network, her eyes narrowed. You mean you need his network? Marcus hesitated. Amara stepped closer, her tone razor-sharp. Tell me the truth. Did you already speak to Kane? He faltered, eyes flickering. Marcus. Her voice cut like glass. He exhaled. Yes, I reached out. He's willing to reconsider if we approach this the right way. The betrayal hit like a slap. You went behind my back? I went to protect the company. Marcus shot back. You're letting pride drive decisions. That's dangerous. Amara's voice trembled, not with fear, but fury. Dangerous? Marcus, do you know what's dangerous? Teaching every person in this building that our worth depends on men like Kane. That their respect is a currency we must purchase with silence. Marcus's jaw tightened. And what happens when the investors pull out? When the stock drops? Will pride protect paychecks then? Amara's stare was unflinching. You think Kane will save us? He never wanted to do business with me. He wanted to humiliate me. And you want to crawl back to him begging? Marcus's voice softened, almost pleading. I'm trying to save us. Amara's reply was icy. No, you're trying to save yourself. Because men like you survive by bending to power, not challenging it. The hallway buzzed with silence. Employees passing by slowed, sensing tension. Marcus noticed and lowered his tone. Think carefully, Amara. You can't win this alone. If you push Kane too far, he'll bury you. She stepped back, eyes blazing. Let him try. And if you're too afraid to stand with me, Marcus, then get out of my way. That night in her office, Michael stormed in. I don't trust him. Marcus, he's already halfway in Kane's pocket. Amara sighed, rubbing her temples. I know. Then fire him, Michael snapped. Why keep a traitor at your table? Amara shook her head. Because sometimes a traitor is useful. He'll run back to Kane with whatever he learns. And when the truth comes out, both of them will fall together. Michael blinked. You're playing with fire. Her eyes hardened. I've been burned before. I don't fear the flames anymore. Across the city, Marcus sat in a dimly lit bar, his phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he whispered. She's stubborn. She won't budge, a pause, but I can push her. Trust me, Richard. She'll fold eventually. On the other end, Richard Kane's cold chuckle slithered through the line. You'd better be right, Marcus. Because if she doesn't fold, she'll burn, and you'll burn with her. In her penthouse later that night, Amara stood before the window again, watching the city pulse with lights. Her reflection stared back, tired, betrayed but unbroken. Whispers, betrayal, silence. She had faced them all before, but this time, she vowed, her voice firm in the empty room. They won't break me, not from the outside, not from within. The storm began with a phone call. Ms. Johnson? The voice on the other end was cautious, professional. This is Daniel Price, senior reporter with the Financial Standard. I heard you met with Richard Kane. Amara leaned back in her chair, silent for a moment. I did, she said carefully. And that the meeting didn't go well? Her lips curved faintly. Define well, Mr. Price. Daniel hesitated, then pressed. I've spoken to someone who claims Kane said something inappropriate, explicitly racial. Amara's eyes narrowed. And who told you that? I can't disclose my source, Daniel replied. But I wanted to confirm with you directly. Did he say it? Silence stretched. Julia, sitting across the table, shook her head urgently, mouthing, Don't. Amara studied Daniel's voice through the receiver. She could almost hear the hunger beneath his caution. He wanted the truth. He needed it. Finally, she said, Yes, he said it. Word for word, Julia gasped. Amara. Amara raised her hand to silence her. Daniel's tone sharpened. What exactly did he say? Amara's voice was low, deliberate. He looked me in the eye in front of his entire board and said, I don't do business with people like you. Daniel exhaled sharply. Jesus. I want that printed exactly as I've told you, Amara added. No softening. No spin, Daniel's voice steadied. If you go on record, Ms. Johnson, this will be explosive. Are you ready for that? Her reply was steel. I've been ready my whole life. The article dropped 3 days later. Billionaire racism. Kane's 3B. Slur exclusive. Amara Johnson speaks out. Words reverberated through the digital universe like a grenade. Social media caught fire within hours. "I don't do business with people like you" trended worldwide. Cancel Kane climbed to the top within a day. Amara sat in her office. Scrolling through waves of posts, she stood up to him. This is why representation matters. Old money terrified of new power. For every troll spitting venom in her direction, 1,000 others shouted her name in solidarity. At Kane International, chaos reigned. Richard slammed the newspaper against the table. "Lies." Whitmore, his advisor, rubbed his temples. "Richard," she went on record. "It's her word against yours," Richard sneered. "Her word means nothing. She's playing the victim card." Again. Another board member cleared his throat nervously. "The shareholders are calling. They want an emergency meeting." Richard's face reddened. "Shareholders are cowards. They'll calm down." But even as he said it, his phone buzzed nonstop. Angry messages from investors, clients canceling contracts, journalists camping outside his office. Back at Johnson Tech, Julia burst into Amara's office, nearly breathless. "You need to see this." She set down her tablet. A video played, a woman in her 60s, white hair trembling as she spoke into a microphone. "I worked at Kane International for 20 years. He called me a diversity hire to my face. Told me women were decoration, not decision makers." The next clip, a young man of Indian descent. "He refused to shake my hand in front of clients. Said it made the company look like it outsourced talent overseas." Clip after clip rolled. Former employees, contractors, even junior executives, all echoing the same poison Amara had endured. Michael leaned forward, stunned. "They're lining up. He's finished." Amara's voice was quiet but fierce. "No, he's only beginning to pay." That evening, Amara agreed to her first on-camera interview. The studio lights were hot, the air thick with anticipation. The anchor, a sharp-eyed black woman named Renee Carter, smiled gently before the cameras rolled. "Ms. Johnson, thank you for joining us." Amara inclined her head. "Thank you for having me." "Tell us," Renee said, voice calm but cutting. "What happened in that boardroom?" Amara inhaled slowly. "Richard Kane looked me in the eye in front of 12 men and told me, 'I don't do business with people like you.'" The studio audience audibly gasped. Renee leaned closer. "And how did that make you feel?" Amara's gaze was steady. "It didn't surprise me. It hurt, but it didn't surprise me. Because racism in business isn't new. It's just usually whispered." This time he said the quiet part out loud. The silence after her words was deafening. The clip went viral within hours. News outlets replayed it. Commentators debated it. Students quoted it on campus walls. Even world leaders were asked about it during press conferences. Richard Kane's name became synonymous with arrogance and decay. And through it all, Amara remained silent outside the interviews. She didn't argue with trolls, didn't spar with critics. She let the storm rage, and the world carried her voice farther than she ever could alone. One night, Michael found her standing by the window again, staring at the glowing skyline. "You did it," he said softly. "You broke through." Amara's voice was distant. "No, I just told the truth." "The world broke him." Michael tilted his head. "And Marcus?" Her expression hardened. "Marcus will show his hand soon enough. Betrayal always does." At that very moment, Marcus sat in a dim hotel room across the city, his phone buzzing with unanswered calls. On the screen, a message glowed from Kane himself. "Shut her down, or we both go under." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead, torn between loyalty and greed. But in the end, silence stretched and he typed back one word: "Trying." Back in her office, Amara whispered to herself as the city thundered with noise outside. "Let the truth do the work. The cracks are showing." And deep inside Kane International's marble fortress, Richard Kane felt, for the first time in decades, the ground shifting beneath his feet. The morning began with shouting, "Mr. Kane! Mr. Kane!" Reporters swarmed the marble steps of Kane International, their microphones stabbing forward like weapons. "Do you deny the allegations? Are you stepping down? Did you really say, 'I don't do business with people like you'?" Richard shoved past them, jaw clenched. No comment. But behind him a different sound grew louder, the roar of a crowd. Protesters filled the street holding signs high. "End corporate racism. Justice for Amara." We are people like you. Their chants shook the glass walls. Inside the boardroom, chaos ruled. I can't hold this together, Whitmore snapped, pacing. Shareholders are in revolt. They've called an emergency vote. Richard slammed his fist against the table. Spin it, say it's exaggerated. A smear campaign. One board member, older, weary, spoke up. Richard, there are recordings now. Employees, contractors, even clients are coming forward. It's not just her word anymore. Richard's face flushed crimson. Lies, all of them. But the silence in the room told him everything. The board no longer believed him. Marcus entered quietly, slipping into a chair. His presence drew Richard's glare. You, Richard barked. You were supposed to contain this. Where's your loyalty? Marcus's voice was low, strained. I tried. But she's untouchable now. Every attempt to discredit her only makes her stronger. Richard sneered. You're weak. Always were. Marcus's jaw tightened. Or maybe I'm tired of cleaning up your messes. Gasps rippled across the boardroom. Richard leaned forward, eyes like knives. Careful, Marcus, but Marcus didn't flinch. For the first time, he met Richard's gaze without fear. Back at Johnson Tech, Amara stood in front of her team. The protests are growing, Julia reported. College campuses, Wall Street, even outside Kane's headquarters. It's becoming a movement, Michael added. Investors are pulling out in droves. Kane's stock dropped 15% in 2 days. Amara folded her arms, her voice steady. This isn't just about me anymore. It's bigger than one insult. It's about every person they tried to silence. Her staff nodded, fire in their eyes. Julia whispered, You've become a symbol, Amara. Amara shook her head. No, the people in the streets are the symbol. I'm just the spark. That evening, a shareholder meeting convened, packed, tense, suffocating with fear and anger. Richard entered, forcing a smile. Ladies and gentlemen, this company stands strong. We will weather this media circus. Enough, a shareholder interrupted. Our stocks are bleeding. Our reputation is destroyed. This is your doing, Kane. Another rose, waving a printed article. Major partners have pulled out. Do you understand the scale of this? Richard barked back. Do you understand the scale of my name? Without me, this empire doesn't exist. But the room erupted in boos and shouts. Marcus leaned in, whispering so only Richard could hear. They're voting tonight. You're finished. Meanwhile, outside Kane International, the protests reached fever pitch. Renee Carter stood with a microphone, broadcasting live. What we're seeing tonight is unprecedented. Thousands have gathered, demanding Kane's resignation. This is more than a scandal. This is a reckoning. A young black woman in the crowd lifted a sign reading, I don't do silence anymore. The cameras caught her tears. Her fists raised high. Inside, the vote was swift, brutal, all in favor of removing Richard Kane as CEO of Kane International. Hands rose across the room. One after another until nearly all were raised, Richard's face turned ashen. Opposed? Only Richard's hand shot up. The chairman's voice rang clear. The motion passes. Effective immediately, Richard Kane is removed as CEO. The room exhaled. Cameras flashed. Whispers of relief filled the air. Richard staggered back, eyes blazing with disbelief. You traitors. Every last one of you. Marcus stood slowly, his voice cold. No, Richard. We were prisoners. Now we're free. The news broke within minutes. Richard, Kane ousted in shareholder. Revolt. Corporate titan falls amid racism. Scandal. Power shifts at Kane International. Social. Media exploded with celebration. Memes, hashtags, and videos flooded the net. People like us. Justice served. Amara sat at her desk, watching the news in silence. Julia rushed in, ecstatic. He's out, Amara. He's finished. Michael clapped his hands. The king has fallen. But Amara's expression stayed thoughtful, almost somber. This isn't the end, she said quietly. He'll fight. Men like him always do. That night, Richard sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights glaring through the windows like judgmental eyes. His phone rang. Unfamiliar number. He answered sharply. What? A voice he recognized instantly cut through the line. Amara's. You built an empire on arrogance, Richard. Tonight it collapsed under its own weight. Richard snarled. You think you've won? Her voice was calm, almost sorrowful. I didn't have to win. You lost yourself. Then the line went dead. Back in her office, Amara turned off her phone and whispered to herself, Poetic justice begins. Richard Kane sat in his penthouse, whiskey glass trembling in his hand. The skyline stretched before him like a battlefield, towers of glass and steel, mocking him with their silence. His empire was gone. The television blared across the room, anchors dissecting his downfall. Former billionaire Richard Kane ousted amid scandal. Share prices of Kane International plummet another 8%. Public protests continue for a fifth straight day. Richard hurled the remote, shattering the screen into sparks.
Lies, parasites!
But the silence that followed was louder than any applause he had ever received. Marcus arrived uninvited. He slipped into the penthouse, shoulders tense, voice low. "You look terrible," Richard sneered. "I lost everything." "Thanks to you," Marcus bristled. "Thanks to me? I defended you for years, Richard. I buried stories, silenced people, scrubbed evidence. I sold pieces of my soul to protect you." Richard laughed bitterly. "Then you're as much a fool as they are." Marcus's jaw tightened. "No, Richard. I was your accomplice. But now I'm your witness." Richard froze. "What did you just say?" "I've agreed to testify," Marcus said quietly. "Congress wants a hearing on systemic racism in corporate America. They want names. I'll give them yours." The silence hung sharp. "Dangerous." Richard's voice dropped to a growl. "You wouldn't dare." Marcus leaned closer, eyes burning. "Watch me." At Johnson Tech, the mood was electric. Julia burst into Amara's office, waving her tablet. "You have to see this." On screen, Marcus Whitmore, seated before cameras in a congressional hearing room. Reporters packed the back rows. He spoke into the microphone, voice steady. "Yes, Richard Kane used racist language in the boardroom. Yes, he directed me to suppress complaints. And yes, he threatened to blacklist any firm that questioned him." Gasps filled the room. Headlines ran live tickers across the screen. Kane's own advisor turns against him. Michael chuckled. Marcus flipped. "He's burning the house down." Amara's face was unreadable. "Not out of guilt. Out of survival." Julia frowned. "Doesn't matter. It still helps us," Amara nodded slowly. "Yes, but justice built on cowardice is fragile. We need to build something stronger." Outside Kane International's shuttered headquarters, protests transformed into vigils. Candles lined the streets. Signs bore Amara's name, her quotes, her image. Children sat on their parents' shoulders chanting, "We do business. We do business." Renee Carter reported live again. "What began as one woman's stand has become a cultural reckoning. This is about every boardroom, every closed door where silence once reigned." Meanwhile, Richard spiraled deeper. He paced his penthouse, muttering, "They think they can erase me? I built this city. I made them rich. I made them powerful." He smashed another glass against the wall. "People like me run the world." But for the first time, the words rang hollow. His phone buzzed. Another message from his lawyer. "The DOJ is opening an investigation. Marcus's testimony is damning. You need to prepare for indictment." Richard's hands shook. "No, no." The walls seemed to close in. The empire he once commanded now reduced to headlines and hearings. At Johnson Tech, Amara gathered her leadership team. "We've been given more than a moment," she said, voice steady. "We've been given a platform. The question is, what do we do with it?" Julia leaned forward. "We launched the foundation." Michael nodded. "Scholarships, grants, investment in minority-owned startups. Let's turn Kane's collapse into the birth of something new." Amara's eyes softened. "Yes, legacy isn't just about what you destroy. It's about what you build in the ashes." Her team applauded, but her voice carried weight beyond the room, as if she were speaking to history itself. The final blow came a week later. Richard Kane was arrested. Cameras flashing as federal agents escorted him from his penthouse. Reporters shouted over one another. "Mr. Kane, do you have anything to say? Are the charges true? Do you regret what you said to Amara Johnson?" Richard's face was pale, lips pressed in a thin line. For the first time, Richard Kane had no words. That evening, Amara walked to the same window where she had once stood in silence after the boardroom humiliation. The skyline glowed again. But this time it looked different, like something conquered. Reclaimed. Michael joined her quietly. "He's done. Indicted, disgraced, stripped of power." Amara exhaled. "That's the thing about men like him. They believe their empires make them untouchable, but arrogance is the most fragile foundation of all." Julia joined them, smiling. "The foundation's ready. We already have investors pledging millions. They want to back you, Amara. Amara turned from the window, a rare smile gracing her lips. Good, because this isn't about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. A week later, Amara stood on a stage, lights bright, cameras rolling. Tonight, she began, her voice carrying over the hushed audience. We launched the Johnson Foundation, dedicated to empowering those who were denied, silenced, overlooked. For too long, we've been told we don't do business with people like you. She paused, gaze steady, but the truth is, without people like us, there is no business. The crowd erupted in applause, cheers rising like thunder. Somewhere far away in a cell cold and silent, Richard Kane sat alone. He replayed her words on a cracked television, face twisted with bitterness. But no matter how tightly he clenched his fists, no matter how furiously he denied it, the world had moved on, and his name was no longer written in marble but in ash. Backstage, Amara breathed deeply, her heart steady. Julia hugged her tightly. Michael clapped her shoulder. You did it, Michael whispered. Amara shook her head softly. No, we did it. Every voice that refused silence. Every hand that held a candle. Every person who said, enough, this is their victory too. That night, as she returned home, Amara stood once more by the window. The city pulsed with life below, but the silence around her was no longer heavy. It was peace. 6 months later, the world had changed. At a sleek convention center in Washington, banners stretched across the walls. The Johnson Foundation, investing in people like us. Amara stood at the podium, elegant and composed. The room was filled with leaders, tech giants, entrepreneurs, activists, students. The energy buzzed like electricity. Julia adjusted her headset at the side of the stage. Michael hovered near the investors section. Already scribbling notes, Amara lifted the microphone. 6 months ago, I was told, I don't do business with people like you. A murmur rippled through the room. Everyone knew the story now. It had become part of corporate folklore. But look around you, Amara continued. This room, this moment, this movement is business. Built by people who refuse to be silenced. People who know resilience better than privilege. Thunderous applause shook the hall. Later, backstage, Julia hugged her tightly. That was perfect. You've turned pain into power. Michael grinned. And a $3 billion deal turned into a $3 billion movement. Amara chuckled softly, shaking her head. That money never mattered. What matters is that the next black woman walking into a boardroom doesn't walk in alone. Across the ocean, Richard Kane sat hunched in a gray prison cafeteria. His once perfect hair was disheveled, his tailored suits replaced by a faded jumpsuit. No one turned to look at him. No one whispered his name. The television mounted high on the wall replayed highlights from Amara's speech. Without people like us, there is no business. Richard's jaw clenched. He muttered under his breath, liars, all of them. But no one listened. For the first time in his life, Richard Kane was irrelevant. Marcus sat in a different room. This one a small community hall, crowded with young entrepreneurs. He spoke carefully, humbly, sharing lessons from years of complicity. I protected a man who didn't deserve it. I silenced voices that deserved to be heard. Don't repeat my mistakes. Build with integrity or nothing you build will last. Some eyed him with suspicion. Others nodded thoughtfully. Marcus knew redemption would be slow, maybe impossible. But at least now he was telling the truth. Meanwhile, the Johnson Foundation grew faster than anyone predicted. A scholarship program launched in Chicago. A mentorship hub opened in Atlanta. Seed funding poured into minority-owned startups from Detroit to Lagos. Amara traveled tirelessly, shaking hands, listening to stories, planting seeds of change in every city she touched. Everywhere she went, people quoted her words back to her. We do business. We do belong. One evening, Amara returned home, exhaustion heavy but spirit light. She walked to the window, the same window where humiliation had once pressed on her like chains. The city glittered below. But tonight it looked different again. Not mocking, not menacing, hopeful. Michael joined her, sipping tea. Julia curled up on the sofa, scrolling through the Foundation's latest impact report. This is just the beginning, Julia said softly. Amara smiled. Exactly. We lit a spark. Now the world will keep it burning. The story that began in a single boardroom now lived everywhere. In classrooms, in headlines, in whispered encouragement between colleagues walking into meetings. Children studied Amara's speech in debate clubs. Activists cited her in protests. Executives revised policies, fearing to be the next Kane. The ripple had become a tide. And as the night deepened, Amara whispered to herself, not in anger, not in sorrow, but in triumph. They said, "I don't do business with people like you." But history answered, "Without us, there is no business at all."